Well, with that, let's turn our Bibles to the book of Numbers, chapter 22. The title of our study is God Speaks Through a Donkey. And so far, as we've been going through the book of Numbers, we have seen the children of Israel are moving closer and closer to the promised land. We saw last week the people angered God, and God sent some fiery serpents among the people, and they were being bit by the snake and dying. And so God told Moses to make a bronze serpent and lift it up on a pole, and whoever looked at that bronze serpent would be healed and live. And then we talked about how that points us to Jesus on the cross, that by faith we just have to look to him for our salvation. We don't have to do any good works to try and attain salvation. The work is finished. We just have to look to him and trust in his finished work. So that's kind of where we're picking up here in chapter 22. And so those that are alive left in the camp are now near the southern plains of Moab, which is east of the Dead Sea area. But what's interesting is we kind of take a little bit of a break from looking at the children of Israel, and we sort of pan over to another group of people. And we'll see a king named Balak of Moab, and we'll see this odd guy named Balaam, and his donkey who talks to him. So we'll look at that in detail as well. So let's take a look at the first 6 verses here together in Numbers chapter 22. Then the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now this company will lick up everything around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of the Moabites at that time. Then he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river, that's the Euphrates River, in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, "Look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are settling next to me. Therefore, please come at once. Curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." We'll pause there. As we see the Israelites moving toward Canaan, again, the promised land that God had given to the nation of Israel, we begin to see the reputation precedes them. We've seen what they did to Sihon, king, and Og, king of Bashan, before them, and how they took out the Amorites. And so the Moabites are well aware of these miracles. They're well aware that God gave them a miracle exodus out of Egypt through the Red Sea, and as they've been wandering in the wilderness, that God's provided for them for about 39 years thus far. And they're familiar with the recent destruction of the Amorites. So when Balak begins to see these people coming towards him, he begins to be afraid of the people and the vast number that they have in their camp. And again, some people have estimated anywhere between 1 million to 3 million people that are traveling together here in the wilderness. So I'm sure I would probably wonder what's going on if I saw 1 to 3 million people coming towards me as well. But we've seen in the past that they're looking just to pass through the land, right? And so it's very possible that Moses would have sent out messengers to ask the same thing, but it kind of seems here that Balak skipped that, and we see he kind of made this decision out of fear. This king Balak, he's got a name which means devastation, which is interesting because he's probably a guy of power who's used to getting what he wants or causing devastation to get what he wants. And so he sees these people coming, and he decides now's the time to act, and he responds in fear, which is never a good way to make decisions. I got to tell you, if you're making decisions based on fear, you're going to continue to live in fear. Better to have faith in the Lord and to seek him and seek his wisdom in decisions. and if need be, to know that there's safety in the multitude of counselors, to talk to godly friends who love the Lord and get their input and their wisdom to help you make a good decision. But we see here that instead he contacts the elders of Moab, and they collude with the neighboring Midianites to summon a prophet named Balaam. And verse 6 tells us, because he wanted to put a curse on God's people. Now, this guy Balaam's interesting. His parents gave him an interesting name too. His name means not of the people. And I've heard some parents name their kids interesting names, but I don't know why you want to name your kid not of the people. But he would definitely be a pagan prophet who was not of the people of Israel. And it's very possible he knew Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, from the land of Midian. And so he had some connection, some awareness of the God of Israel. And so this Mr. Not of the People, he was a soothsayer. That's one who foretells the future by ungodly means. And so he's this very odd guy. And what is fascinating is we'll take a look next week in a couple of chapters together. He says some of the most remarkable prophecies concerning the coming Messiah and concerning Israel. But we'll see that when we get to Numbers 25, that he's actually a wicked prophet. His heart is not right. Maybe the words that he says are right sometimes, but his heart is not right with the Lord. And he would be able to hear from God and give some true prophecies to speak, but eventually he'll show his true colors when we get to chapter 25 and betray Israel by leading them astray. And when we get to that point, we'll take a look at the references that Peter makes, Jude makes, and the book of Revelation makes back to this guy Balaam, and the warnings for us to not stray away from the truth and be on guard against false teachers. So we see they're making decisions based on fear, which again is never a good way to operate. Next, we'll see that Balaam fails to heed God, and we'll take a look at that here in verse 7. And I think we'll go all the way through verse 21. So picking up here in verse 7. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the diviner's fee in their hand. And they came to Balaam and spoke to him the words of Balak. And he said to them, Lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and said, Who are these men with you? So Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent me, saying, Look, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come now, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to overpower them and drive them out. And God said to Balaam, You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, Go back to your land. The Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. And the princes of Moab rose and went with Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. Then Balak again sent princes more numerous and more honorable than they. And they came to Balaam and said to him, Thus says Balak, the son of Zippor, Please let nothing hinder you from coming to me. For I will certainly honor you greatly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Therefore, please come, curse this people for me. Then Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord, my God, to do less or more. Now, therefore, please, you also stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, If the men come to call you, rise and go with them. But only the word which I speak to you, that you shall do. So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. There we go. All right, so we see here that it looks like Balaam was used to making these enchantments, that he was used to collecting this diviner's fee and putting curses on people. And we see that's exactly what the king wanted. He wanted to put a curse on the people of Israel. As I was thinking about this guy, he really is a creepy kind of guy. And in my mind, kind of went to Jafar from Aladdin, kind of that kind of guy, that is into those weird enchantments and is all about the money and the power and the fame for himself, and not someone I would really want to hang out with. And so we see that he's offered this reward, and it would seem that when he went to a prophet to seek advice, he'd bring some kind of gift for that prophet. And we see even in Israel that was the custom going forward, that they would bring a gift for the prophet. And you'd take the gift and then ask him to seek the Lord for you. I'm not a prophet, and I don't claim to be, but I do like chocolate chips, so if you want to make me chocolate chip cookies, I'll take it. But just kidding, I'm not prophet. So I'm a servant of God, just like you guys. And but there are those out there that say they're a prophet and they're used to taking bribes, like this guy. And we see that they tried to buy him his services. And so God asked him who these men were. And he didn't ask that because, God didn't know who they were. He knew who these men were. But he's trying to show Balaam that he's being bought, right? That he's trying to almost become a for-profit, if you will, a prophet for profit. And that's never good when your convictions can be bought, when your convictions can be swayed. I think we live in a day and age where we want people to stand for truth, stand for righteousness, and not be swayed by money or by politicians or anything else. And so we see that Balaam sought God, and the Lord said, don't go with the king. Don't curse these people. They've already been blessed. And so this is God's direct command to Balaam. And I don't know, this might have been the first time he got a reply back from the Lord. But we see his heart was not right in this matter, and again, he looked to profit from the situation. So basically he says, sorry guys, God's not going to let me go with you. And we see the king sent menaces of greater stature as far as that government was concerned to him. And we see the king felt embarrassed about not being able to get this guy to work for him, so he sends more important people. And the government officials basically said, name the price, it's yours. We'll pay you for your services. So we see here in verse 18, he calls God Lord. It seems to be there's some sort of superficial connection with the Lord. And maybe the words are right, but his heart is not right. And we talked about this last week, about the need to be born again. Again, as that bronze serpent lifted up, pointing us to Jesus Christ lifted up. And that need to have that personal relationship with God, right? Because it's not about religion, it's about relationship. There's a lot of things that people try and do to appease God or make their way into heaven, to pay for their way to get into heaven. But Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to heaven except through him. And so it's a relationship, it's connecting with Jesus. And we see that it's a reminder here of the importance of that. That Balaam doesn't have that relationship. What's also interesting here is God said that he could only go if the men called for him in the morning. And it's not recorded for us here that the men actually called for him in the morning. It seems like he just kind of went along with these guys, assuming, well, of course they're going to call me. I might as well just saddle my donkey and get ready to go with these leaders of Moab. Again, we begin to see this guy's heart is not really right. He's desiring things for himself, and his heart is far from the Lord. And so we'll see next that he has this interesting encounter as he begins to pursue his own desires. We'll see that God opens a mouth and that some eyes are opened as well. So we'll take a look at that here in verse 22, and I think we'll go to the end of the chapter through verse 41. Then God's anger was aroused because he went, and the angel of the Lord took a stand in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. Now the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the road. The angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right hand or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's anger was aroused, and he struck the donkey with the staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you, that you've struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have abused me. I wish there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you." So the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden, ever since I became yours to this day? Was I ever disposed to do this to you?" And he answered, "No." Verse 31. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would have killed you by now and let her live." And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know you stood in the way against me. Now therefore, if it displeases you, I will turn back." The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but only the word that I speak to you, that you shall speak." So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. Verse 36. Now when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the border at Arnon, the boundary of the territory. Then Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not earnestly send to you, calling for you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you?" And Balaam said to Balak, "Look, I have come to you. Now have I any power at all to say anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I must speak." So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kirjath Huzoth. And then Balak offered oxen and sheep, and he sent some to Balaam and to the princes who were with him. So it was the next day that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, and that from there he might observe the extent of the people. And now this is a very interesting section of Scripture. I recall one of the gentlemen in our fellowship was in somebody's home doing some carpeting for them, and he was trying to witness to this fellow and saw there was a Bible on the shelf and said, "Hey, do you ever read that Bible of yours?" "No, I don't read that, and I don't think there's anything in there that's really interesting." And so this guy in our fellowship said, "Well, there's a lot of interesting things in there. I just was reading about this donkey that began to speak." And the guy's like, "What are you talking about? There's a story in the Bible of a donkey talking?" He's like, "Yeah, it's in Numbers 22. Is the guy named Balaam and his donkey." And he's like, "Look, I used to go to church as a kid all the time. I've never heard this story." So he begins to show him this passage and begins to witness to this guy and plant a seed in his heart and encourage him to get plugged back into a church and connect with the Lord. And I thought, you never know. It could be this passage that God uses someday for you to share the gospel with someone. But we see that God had an express plan for his people, that they would be blessed. And so he tells Balaam, don't go, don't curse these people. But we see his early departure in the morning shows what was already in his heart, his greed. And it would seem that Balaam loved cash more than character. He thought more of gold than he did of God. And he would do anything if the price were right. And so we see that it's this good reminder. If you're out of the center of God's will for your life, you'll get into a mess. All kinds of problems. And we see in verse 22 that he had 2 of his servants with him, and he's bringing them along with him into this mess. They didn't stop him as well. And it says, before he had gone very long, far down the road, it says, the angel of the Lord stood in his path, and he had a sword drawn ready to take off his head. What's interesting here, and what you should know, is anytime you see the word angel in the scriptures, the word just simply means messenger. It's a messenger of the Lord. There are angelic messengers, real physical, spiritual beings that we call angels that you can see, and sometimes they almost appear human-like. Other times they're in their maybe divine form, and you see people are afraid and they kind of take a step back, if you will. What we see here, and what is fascinating, is that this messenger could be the Messiah pre-incarnate. We see that Balaam bows down before this messenger of the Lord, and that this messenger did not refuse it. Typically, when you see in the scriptures, you'll see angels say, no, don't worship me. Worship God only. And you'll see that like in Revelation, where John tries to bow down before the angel. But there's a few places in the Old Testament where you see that the angel of the Lord would receive this kind of worship. And we saw this with Abraham, and we'll see this also when we get later on and into the Judges as well. But we see that this would be really odd if this were not Jesus before he came in human flesh. But in any case, we see they're going through this vineyard. There's a rock wall around it, which would help keep the animals from coming into someone's vineyard and eating the produce, eating those grapes from their labor. And so he's going between these rock walls there. And typically there was some sort of a tower or a watch guard, somebody guarding this area as well, and there doesn't seem to be any of that. And so Balaam didn't see God's messenger, but we see that this donkey saw this messenger from the Lord and pushed up against the wall. Balaam's leg got pinned against the rock, and we see he shows his true colors. He begins to beat this poor little donkey. And so we see he's going again down the road, and then finally the third time, there's nowhere for the donkey to go, and the donkey's been getting beat. And so she just lays down, and Balaam begins to beat that donkey again. And the Lord's anger burned against Balaam for his rebellion, and we see God open the mouth of the donkey. As I was thinking about that, what is more difficult? To open the mouth of a donkey or to open the eyes of Balaam? Balaam was blinded by his greed. He was going to have that money no matter what, even if it cost him everything. And we see it took a supernatural act of God to open his eyes to what he was doing, but we see that he opened the mouth of this donkey. Now, I've seen some ministers and some leaders get prideful in that God has spoken through them. They think of themselves as something super special. And I love what Pastor Chuck Smith said. He said, God still speaks through donkeys today. That should deflate anybody who thinks there's something special and something really glorious. And I would say amen to that. If God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through us. Does he need to? No. Does he want to? Yes. But we should remain humble and teachable and realize he doesn't need me. He wants to use me, but he could open the mouth of a donkey, right? He can accomplish his will with or without me, but he wants me to participate in that plan with him. And so we see that it's a good reminder for us to be humble, that God can use us or he can replace us. And the truth is God can replace me anytime he wants, right? It's in his hands. And so we want to take that opportunity whenever it is to point people to Christ. So essentially the donkey says, hey man, look, have I ever done anything like this before? Have I ever been a mean donkey? Haven't I been a good little donkey to you? And Balaam says, I guess so, but you hurt me, and if I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you where you're at. And as I was reading this and just thinking, I thought, boy, talk about being so mad and so blinded that when a donkey talks to you, you begin to talk back to it. Instead of just being shocked and dumbfounded and saying, well, that's different. Am I losing it? Am I hearing animals? Am I Dr. Doolittle all of a sudden? Or what's going on here? And yet we see that he is just so blinded and in rebellion against the Lord that he doesn't even recognize this. And he's not shocked by the situation. I would think if an animal began to talk to me, I'd be dumbfounded. I would be shocked. I would think, am I losing it? Do I have all my marbles still in there? Or is this animal really talking to me? But we see that he wishes he could kill this donkey at that point. Again, he's set on the prize. He's set on getting that money and the possession of the goods from the king. And I was thinking about that. It reminds me of those sometimes we see on TV, those people that say that God says they need a private jet. You know, those kind of things. The pastors of the bling bling who teach this false prosperity gospel message. And if you really take a look at what they're saying, it's very similar to the musicians of rap music, right? I want the gold, I want the glory, I want the girls, I need a private jet, I need a big mansion, I need to have all this fame and glory. And I just think, man, it's better to be humble. Remember that God can speak through a donkey. And so we want to have that heart of humbleness and not rebel against the Lord. And so Balaam's going there for his own purposes and beats his donkey out of anger because in his eyes it's making him feel like a fool. He's feeling foolish. And so as I was thinking about that in the light of our day and age, and maybe you've seen this as well, maybe even by world leaders that are angry or have a podium and they begin to spout anger towards certain people or people groups, it begins to show their irrationality, that they're not thinking clearly. And so anytime we see that somebody is so angry, it has this way of curtailing rational thought. It hinders their ability to think clearly and logically. And that's important, that we can think clearly and logically. And so angry people don't think with logic. And maybe you've seen some of those funny, I don't want to say funny, but sometimes they're funny videos of the Karen, on YouTube, and the gal that goes off on somebody and kind of puts her nose where it doesn't belong in someone else's business. Again, when people are so angry in their emotions, they're not thinking clearly. And we see that's what's taking place here, that Balaam is just so caught up in the moment, he's not even realizing that he's speaking back and talking to a donkey. And so at this point, God opened his eyes, and he sees the angel of the Lord, this messenger from God, standing there with a sword. And I think, that as a reminder, that's a good prayer for us, is God to open our eyes to see you and to know your truth, and open the eyes of those around us, that they be open to the gospel message. Because there are many people who are blinded by the darkness of sin and blinded by their own pride and their own greed. And God needs to remove the scales from their eyes, to open their eyes to see him. As we say in that song earlier, open the eyes of my heart, Lord. So we see that God's messenger said, hey, you better be thankful for that little donkey you got, because had she not turned aside, you would be a goner. I would have taken off your head. And we see that Balaam responds. He says, I've sinned, yet he really doesn't want to turn back. We see that his mind is still set on going and not really acknowledging that he's displeased the Lord. And I thought, how often does God's Spirit have to speak to Balaam before he gets his point across? How often has God to speak to you and me before we turn around from the wrong way and do that which pleases God. I would hope it wouldn't take something like this to get us back on the right path. But basically we see Balaam says, oh, okay, oh my, I'll go back home if that's what you want. And the heavenly messenger says, no, you've come this far. I already know what's in your heart. It's your heart to go. Just make sure you don't say anything more than what God has already said to you. And so we see Balaam, he goes on with the king of Moab, who offered sacrifices and gave him meat to eat. What's interesting here in the Hebrew, it would almost seem like he offered the sacrifices unto Balaam or unto a false god to honor Balaam. And we see that Balaam did not refuse this adoration. Again, we see that the king was feeling embarrassed because he sent messengers to bring back Balaam, and he didn't come. And so now that he finally comes, he's a little bit saying like, hey, I sent messengers to you. Earnestly sent messengers calling for you. Why didn't you come? And then we see Balaam says, I'm here now. I don't have power to say anything other than what God has told me to say. And so we see that this interesting interaction, and this chapter concludes with them going up to these high places of Baal, which is a false god. And we see that they overlook the people. And as we get into the next chapter, we'll see that their hope is that this king's hope is that as Balaam begins to see all the children of Israel, that he would want to pronounce a curse upon them. And what we'll see in the end is we'll see, instead of curses, he pronounces blessings on the children of Israel. And again, some of the most beautiful prophecies of the Old Testament will come out of the mouth of this guy. So, in closing, there's a very sad reality today that many people listen to a message that's tainted with Balaam's kind of philosophy. And they lack the discernment to know when someone departs from the truth and has corrupted the word of God. You see, they can speak like a child of God, but then they live like a child of the devil. Right? It's one thing to say that you're a Christian. It's another thing to actually show by the way you live that you're a follower of Christ. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but just because you go to a church gathering doesn't make you a Christian. Any more than going and standing in your garage makes you a car, right? You have to put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ to become a child of God. It's a personal relationship. So one of my friends says, Pastor Tim, he says, God has no grandchildren. We each become a child of God. We each have to make that personal decision to put our faith in God. We can't come to God through the faith of our parents. We need to have our own faith placed in Jesus Christ. And so we see that this guy, he acted very foolishly. He wanted to know the will of God, but he didn't want to do it. He had a form of godliness, but it had no control over his life. Again, next time we'll see these blessings that he prophesies over to Israel in chapter 23 and chapter 24. Then when we get to chapter 25, we'll see his true colors are shown as he realizes that pronouncing curses aren't going to work. He can only pronounce blessings. So he tells the king another way to entrap the children of Israel and get them to sin. And he figures out a way to rebel against God and have Israel rebel against God. As I was thinking about that, my closing thought is just, Lord, search our hearts. See if there's anything in us that's greedy for this world and what it would offer more than what you have to offer us. May our desire be for more of you, Jesus. And I thought, may God help us to listen to him and not be like Balaam, to not act like a donkey. That he would help us to turn around and repent and follow after him. That God would open our eyes to the false prophets of today, to not be drawn away from Jesus because he truly loves us. He died on the cross for us. He was buried and rose from the dead, and he wants to offer us that forgiveness. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for your love for us. We thank you as we partake in communion in just a few moments that we'll be reminded of this as well. The way that you demonstrated your own love for us while we were yet sinners, that Jesus, you died for us, that you went to the cross to lay down your life for us. was truly dead. You were buried in that tomb, but the third day you rose from the dead. And so, God, we ask that we just continue to recognize that you are first and foremost in the place of our heart, that you are on the throne of our heart. God, help us to be sensitive to hear your voice, that still small voice, as you're calling us to follow after you. They would recognize your voice, Lord, the voice of truth above the other voices of this world and the nonsense that we see on TV and the media these days. Help us to know, Lord, your truth that sets us free. And God, we pray for those in our community and in this nation and this world who were blinded by greed and displaying their colors of anger and hatred towards people. Lord, would you convict them of their sin, convince them of your love, their need to surrender their life to you and truly connect with you, to have a relationship with you. And God, we do pray even this morning, if there be anyone here among us who need to make that decision, to put their faith and their trust in you, that God, today would be the day of salvation. And if you're here this morning to say, Pastor Tim, pray for me, pray with me, I need to get right with God, or you're watching on the live stream or listening to this message later on when it's archived, and you need to surrender your life to God, I want to encourage you to do that today. Make today the day of salvation, where you put your faith and your trust in Jesus Christ. And if that's you, I just simply want to lead you in a prayer, and I encourage you to repeat this prayer after me and truly mean it in your heart. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I realize that my sin separates me from you. And God, I realize that you love me. That Jesus, you died on the cross for my sins. That you were buried and rose from the dead. God, I ask you, forgive me of my sins. Come into my heart and my life. Be my Savior and my Lord. God, I thank you for loving me. I thank you for forgiving me. I thank you for adopting me into your family. I pray you'd help me to follow you from this day forward. I pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Look, if that was you and it's that first time you prayed to receive Jesus Christ, or perhaps rededication, let me know. I'd love to encourage you, pray with you, give you some resources, give you a Bible if you don't have one.